Welcome to Tiny Hands Big Dreams here in the homestead in southern Ecuador. I want to talk about a subject that there's a lot of confusion about: how to pick a battery for your solar system. You want to get into solar, it's a confusing subject. There's a lot of kinds of batteries out there. Of each kind, there's a ton of styles and shapes and sizes. It's honestly kind of confusing. So this is a video for novices, people who have no idea whatsoever. I'm going to make it really simple on how to pick a battery for what you're trying to do. Now, whether you're building a system that size, that's going to run your whole house, or this big, because you just need a little bit. You just want like a little power station somewhere, or just to recharge a small thing. There's a lot of options. Batteries, it can be in a lot of shapes and forms. So, that is a battery. Everybody knows what that is. That's a AA battery. Then you get up into, say, a lead-acid car battery. People know what those are. Good. Then you get into lithium iron phosphate batteries, sometimes just known as lithium. Cool. They have their applications. Are they right? Maybe. Maybe not. And then there's other things. If this is a AA, is it an alkaline or rechargeable? If it's rechargeable, what kind? There's different chemistries. And they count differently. A can of gasoline could also be considered a battery. It is a store of energy, but you can't recharge it. So we're going to stick to the rechargeable kinds. We're going to talk about what are the most common typical things of batteries and what you're going to use them for. Now, the first thing is you have to figure out is, how big of a battery do you need? Is that enough? What about 4 of them? What about 12 of them all put together? I mean, maybe. It depends what you're doing. Are you just trying to run a small light or a little camera somewhere? Are you trying to run your fridge? That ain't gonna cut it. We also have to talk about what kind of use is it for. Now, the kind of uses are, you got to think. I'm gonna try to keep this really simple. Uses in your home can be very, very different. A blender uses a ton of power for a short period of time. Microwave, same thing. Now, if we were to chart it, it's a huge spike and then nothing. But if you turn on a light bulb, it's just a tiny little bit, but it's on for a long time. That can actually be a different battery. One battery may not work for the other application. So the first thing you have to do is start to figure out how much battery you need and what is the use of it. In a lot of things, there's no, a lot of people would and I saw in our comments, people say, oh, well, this battery is best, or this battery is best. Don't get into the best. The best battery is the one that fits your application and gives you success in what you're trying to do. That's the best battery. Don't get hung up, on bees. Don't get hung up on specific chemistries or styles or things or the latest and greatest. I've been through all sides of it, and I can tell you, the one that works best for you is the one that works best. The one that fails, no matter how cool or fancy it is, and if it fails you, it failed. We don't want that. So what are the 2 typical kinds? Well, we're gonna have to pause because now it's raining. Pooh. So of all the types of batteries, there are 2 main types that are basically the bulk of what everybody uses: lead acid and lithium iron phosphates. Now, they each have pros and cons. They have price differences, they have usage differences, they have availability differences. They have level of technology and guru needed to operate them, sometimes needed differences. But before we get into the pros and cons and the kind of the specifics, the idiosyncrasies of each type, let's think about what a battery really is. Now, let's think of it like water. Water is easy. Let's call a battery a bucket. Your bucket holds so much water or energy, just like a battery. The parallels are actually pretty solid there. Now, if you have a big bucket, you hold more water. If you have a small bucket, you hold little water. A AA would be a very small bucket. A drum would be a good-sized battery, it just holds more. Now, if you were to stack buckets on top of each other and they fed through, you would get more pressure. That would be like voltage. The pressure of water kind of equals the voltage. Amperage, which is how much is flowing at that voltage, is like the volume. So your typical garden hose, say it's 3/4 inch, and the water comes out. Now, even if you have almost no pressure, the water still comes out at a certain rate. That would be the flow or the amperage. Pressure, if you think of like a pressure washer, it has a very tiny hole and the water comes out very, very fast. That would be like high voltage but low flow or low amperage. So when doing work with your battery, you have to think of, well, how much capacity do I need for the application? So let's take a couple of quick examples. Refrigerator, super common. People want to, emergency use of fridge. Your typical fridge doesn't draw a ton of power while it runs. It may be 100 watts. It does, however, have a momentary surge when it starts, which can be 10 or even 20 times its running current. And then we think of how much does it run throughout the day? Well, it turns on and then it turns off. If we were to graph it, that's what I'm drawing here is the graph. And it turns on and off, and it might be on for 20 minutes, it might be off for 30 or 40 minutes. So maybe it's on a third of the day. Well, if it uses 100 watts and it runs for a third of the day, that would be, say, 8 hours. So 8 hours times 100 watts is 800 watts or 0.8 kilowatts. A kilowatt is really 1,000 watts used for 1 hour. You can divide it up into little pieces, you can add them back together, or you can use them all at once. If you have a microwave and you hit the button, it's using 1,000 watts of power, but you're only going to run it, say, for 5 minutes. Well, that's only 1/12 of an hour, so that would only be 1/12 of a kilowatt to run said microwave. But you need the capability of a lot of power right up front. Now, some people, and I've seen, will try to get these little batteries that were meant for other applications, and I think they come in emergency lighting systems. They're little gel cells. And they're good batteries, but they have limits. And they'll say right on there, like maximum continuous output of like 10 amps. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, 10 amps, that's the amount of flow that it can do. And say it's a 12-volt battery, which is the most common, that would be 120 watts. That's it. 120 watts is its maximum for a period of time until it runs out. And it, depending on the size, will take minutes to hours to do so. And you want to run your blender on it, which pulls 1,000 watts. Well, that doesn't work. You'll kill the battery. It will work a few times. It will work for a month or two, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's just not working anymore. Failure. So you have to understand kind of how things fail to pick how to do it. We'll get into a typical car battery. Now, car batteries have a starting battery, which is your typical in a car battery. It's called a starting battery. It provides a lot of power for a very short amount of time. It does not like providing a medium amount of power for a long time. They call that a deep cycle battery. Sometimes a marine battery, a golf cart battery, an RV battery. But a starting battery, short loads, high output. Deep cycle battery, medium loads for a long time. Now, say you get a deep cycle battery and you want to run that blender again. Well, guess what? They're constructed differently internally, and you might need 2 of the big batteries that are deep cycle to get enough momentary output without damaging the battery. So it's not really made to do that kind of high output. And to go back to the bucket analogy, what kind of bucket is it? How big is the bucket? So that's like a lead acid, and that's the 2 types. There's the starting and the deep cycle. The lead acid's a good battery. It's considered old tech. A lot of people poo-poo all over it and say, oh, it says that it's dead. It's a good battery. It will last you many years used correctly. It's available everywhere. They're tolerant of all sorts of abuse, of bad charging things. They'll take up a lot of abuse. Don't count them out. Now, the other big one is the lithium iron phosphates. Now, I run our house on lithium iron phosphates. Man, they're really awesome. They have a ton of power. They have a massive level of momentary dump. They can just dump power like it's nobody's business. I could melt things with them. That's the cool part. The uncool part is they don't like certain things. They don't like being cold. You cannot charge them below freezing. You can use them. You got to get them warm again before you can recharge them. They don't like vibration. They don't like to travel. They're also built as a pack where there's a bunch of batteries stuck together and wired in series. Those batteries are only 3.3 volts each cell. So you have to have at least 4 to make a 12-volt battery. Well, that means you have 4 batteries now that are packaged together. Well, if they're not packaged really good and they jostle around, then there can be internal problems. There's even been fires where people have put packs together and it wasn't snug enough in, say, an RV, and the dumb things came loose and wore spots between them and arced out, and like there could be failure. You don't want that. So they have their own issues. They also have what's called a BMS. A lithium battery is very, very touchy about how it's charged. It likes to be charged fully until it reaches a certain voltage and then turned off again. It doesn't like to be held at a high voltage. It doesn't like to be like trickle charged. Charge it and get out. And they work well in that application. If you're running a household off a generator, that is absolutely the ticket. You charge it, you put a couple hours of generator time on it, you push really hard, and then you shut it off. You can't do that with a lead acid. Lead acid has 3 stages of charging versus 1 stage for lithium. The 3 stages are your bulk stage, where it'll push a ton of power. Okay. And then absorption phase, which is, I don't know, so the first 60% is bulk, and then another 20%, 30%, something like that is absorption, where they raise the voltage a little bit, and then the amps go in less and less and less and less and less and less and less. And it sort of peters down, and then you get to a float stage, which it just holds a little above the battery's voltage, and it just trickles in. Now, if you're trying to charge it via generator, well, that bulk stage is easy. You just push it in, and then you get to the absorption stage, and your generator is just spinning like it's going and going and going. You're wasting a ton of fuel to get this tiny little charge into your battery. And you're probably just going to turn the dumb thing off because it's like hardly doing anything. So you're never getting that last 10, maybe 20% of the charge into the lead acid battery because of the style of charging. So style of charging plays into that, and that's a lithium lead acid difference. You got to think of how you're charging it. So on solar, lead acids and solar do really well. When there's power, it'll push the power in, and then throughout the rest of the day, it'll just trickle in that power because you have the sun. So you're going to try to pick your application, and then you're going to fit the battery. It's an infinite amount of questions, but let's take a couple of small ones. So some people just want, hey, I want a little backup power kind of station. The power goes off sometimes. We're dead in the water. I want to charge a laptop, a cell phone, run the router, still have internet. Okay, so you look at how much power each of those things take. Now, every device that's made tells you how much power it draws on its cord or its power brick or on the back of the device. And you can look at those, and it's really simple math to figure it out. So a laptop will plug in, and it'll say 120 volts input at half an amp. You're like, okay, so 120 times half an amp is 60 watts. So it pulls 60 watts continuous. So if you were to do it for 10 hours, that would be 600 watts. You can just multiply by 10. And that's 0.6 kilowatts, because kilowatts, remember, is 1,000. That's like the standard base, kilowatt hours. That's how power bills are done, is in kilowatt hours. Okay, so if you want to run a system for, you think a power outage is typically in your area, say only 10 hours. That's great. So I need 600 watts for the laptop. I need, another 100 watts for a cell phone. I need, you kind of add it up. Do you want to run the fridge? All right, add the fridge in there. Which is probably, I think we said before, if it's 100 watt average and it runs a third of the time, so it typically averages 30 watts, averaged out, 10 hours, 300 watts, that's great. So we're at just about a kilowatt. How do we get a kilowatt of power in a battery? Well, if it's a storage battery, you can just look at the label and it'll say how many amp hours at how many volts. and you can just compute it. 12 volts, 100 amp hour. That's great. 1.2 kilowatts. 10 times 120 is 1200. That's really easy. If you're using a starting battery, they're rated in a thing called cold cranking amps. And cold cranking amps is how much oomph that battery can push for so many seconds when it's cold in the winter to start a car. Because remember, that's its application. It's not to say it won't do what you need it to do, and it very well may, and I use them. But it's not really rated the same. But they're super available, they're economical. You can just go pick one up anywhere. Something to be said for that. We're here in southern Ecuador. The solar stuff is really hard to find. Lithium batteries, good luck. Yeah, it's just not available. Like, nobody has it. There's a place on the other side of the country that has some. They're always out of stock. The prices are insane. Lead acid here, lead acid's really, it's a pretty good option. It's available everywhere. Big truck batteries, golf cart batteries, yep, you can get those. So that's something to think about. So that gets you the battery. The battery is what you live on. The battery is what stores your energy. And it's really just a function of figuring out how much you use, how much it's going to hold, how much you want to pay for it, and does it work in your application, in your environment, and with your charging style. Now, we get in charging styles. Some people don't do a solar panel at all. They just get a little charger and they plug it into the wall. When the power comes back on, it just recharges. And you can buy things like that. Uninterruptible power supplies is what they call them. The problem being is it's a fancy box with a small battery. They don't last long. And that's always the problem. They just don't last. So you're stuck with this really expensive cool box, and it's dead in 20 minutes. Not the greatest. To make that battery power usable, you need an inverter. Now, an inverter is a different video. I'll get into all of that, but that converts the 12 volt DC of your battery into 120 volt to run all your plug-in devices. I'll do a separate video on those because there's a bunch of little things to think about. We'll keep this one to just batteries. So some other charging styles. Solar panels. The little one that I had here a minute ago. That's fine. You can keep it inside. You could put it out if you needed to. Now, you have to have a charge controller. All batteries require a charge controller. You can't just dump power on them and expect them to not blow up, die, catch fire. You have to control the power. Now, that charger has to be rated for the type of battery, and not all chargers work on all batteries. If it's lead acid, you want a 3-stage charger minimum. There's 5-stage, there's 8 stages. They're cool. Sometimes they're called battery maintainers. They'll plug into the wall. For solar chargers, pretty much all of them will do lead. Some of them will do lithium. Not all of them. If it's a charger that doesn't have any way to make setting changes, be suspicious of it. I've seen some of those out of China that says works with all batteries, but there's no way to tell it what kind of battery or set any sort of parameters. Probably a bad idea. Again, you treat them differently. You don't keep a lithium battery on a float charge, where on a lead acid it likes to be kept at a float charge level as a maintaining kind of status. That'll kill a lithium. So if your charger is smart enough to know it's a lithium, then when your power comes in, either through a solar panel or the wall, it will charge it up, shut it down, and it's there for you when you need it. Solar chargers, there's really 2 types. There's a lot of fancy options on them, but really there's pulse width modulated and MPPT, multi-point power tracking. It's a lot of big words. It's not really that complicated. Both technologies simply pulse the power to get the battery the voltage that it requires to be safely charged, and on the other side of it holds the solar panel at a correct voltage to where it is producing its best output. Solar panels don't like to be run outside of their designed range, and your charger should know this. Now, some other bits on care and feeding of said battery, depending on which kind suits your application. You have to have it somewhere protected. You don't want children around it. You don't want something to drop on the contacts. You want the contacts to be covered in a secure way with something non-conductive. If you drop a piece of metal or something, or someone drags a dog chain across it, you could have a problem. There's plastic covers, like if you look at your car, there's a little plastic cover that covers the positive terminal, so nothing can fall on it and touch it and arc it out. That's the kind of thing you have to worry about. You don't want a lead acid in a confined space. When charging, they do make a little bit of the outgas hydrogen, and that can be explosive in a confined space. So there can also be a tiny bit of acidic fumes. Again, if you keep it in a tiny box that's sealed, it can be a problem. Otherwise, it's not an issue at all. Wouldn't worry about it as long as there's a tiny bit of venting to how you're keeping it. Now, lithium does not need any sort of venting. No venting should ever happen from your lithiums. But if you do something wrong, well, you maybe want them in an area that is not, say, under your bed. There has been some issues. Somebody wired something wrong, a charger was set wrong, and they go into thermal runaway and they pop. Always keep that in mind. Now, so, future me in editing realized yesterday me forgot a spot. One thing when comparing batteries, lead acid versus lithium, is how much you can use out of its capacity. It's not 100%. Now, this is slightly complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it. It's called depth of discharge. So if you have, we'll go back to the bucket. You think you have a whole bucket, say it's 5 gallons. You could use 5 gallons. That's not so true. If you use, on a lead acid battery, all 5 gallons of power that is available, what you're going to find is that battery wears out very quickly. You're not supposed to go to 100% depth of discharge. Now, there's a chart, and it shows that the less you use out of the battery every discharge, the longer it lasts. It is somewhat linear, so you're like, you could buy twice as much batteries, and they would last twice as long. You're like, or I could just replace it twice as often. And that's sort of also true. This comes down to a question of budget versus utility. And as batteries age, you get less capacity out of them. Lead acids, officially by the book, 50% depth of discharge, 60% is okay. Past that, they do start to age more rapidly. Now, a lithium, they also claim 100% depth of discharge. Not exactly true. So a lithium battery, the way they charge is, it charges to its maximum, and then the charging turns off. That's great. So it starts at 100%. How far can you take it? Well, you can take it down until, of the cells inside, any one of them falls below a minimum threshold voltage. And this is the job of the BMS. You don't have to worry about this. The battery management system has to do this for you. Any one of those cells gets below a certain threshold, it has to turn off power. And that's probably in the neighborhood of like the bottom 5%. Sometimes it happens again on the top. You might lose 5% because they're just slightly out of sync, or the way it's charging. So we'll call it 90%. Now that's a lot better than 60%. The other thing that you have to know with batteries is they have different voltages that they work on. Now, a 12-volt battery runs on a 12-volt scale. And you think, oh, it puts out 12 volts. No, not exactly. A 12-volt lead-acid battery, when it's brimming full, is 12.65 volts. 100%. And then it gets down to like, at 0%, 11.5. Something like that. Reality is, you can run it from 12.65 to about 12. Maybe 12.1. That's your 60-ish% of the battery. So your entire 100% of usable range is 12.65 to 12. Don't go under 12. Under 12, you start to risk hurting the battery. Under 11, you're definitely hurting the battery. You get it under, 8, 9 volts, it's trash. Like, boom. Like, just that fast. That's a lead acid. And the entire range is in that 0.65 of a volt. Now, on a lithium, the individual cells are usually about 3.31 volts. They're going to charge to 3.65 per cell, and say a 12-volt battery, you have 4 of those in there. It's going to immediately rest back to like 3.35. From 3.35 to 3.3 is like half of the charge or more of the battery, maybe 60%. It is in this, it literally, the voltage will stay the same as the battery drains. It just sits the same, and then it'll fall off a cliff. As soon as it starts to drop noticeably, that's sort of where you like conservatively you want to stop using the battery. And then the dangers don't go below voltage is 2.5 to 2.8 per cell, which is 10, 11 volts, there and abouts. So they have very different behaviors in how they work. And you just have to kind of know that in the back of your mind when you're using it. If you don't have complicated safety systems, you have to be able to look at a voltage and be like, oh, that's too low. I can't do all the things that I want to do because it'll just pull the life out of the battery if you don't have automated safety systems to watch that for you. Now, inverters, when you get into inverters, are programmable usually, or built in to where they have a don't go below voltage. But sometimes it's set silly low. Sometimes it's set at like 10 volts. Well, on a lead acid battery, you're already into damage by the time it turns itself off. So you kind of have to be a knowledgeable user. That's just something to think about there. The differences in how they're used. Lithiums have one more thing that I really don't like, but they have to have it, and that's a BMS. Now, a battery management system, or BMS, is usually built into a lithium. Now, you can get these where they look like a big car battery, and there's cells inside, and there's a BMS on it. It's all internal. You don't see it. All you see are some big contacts, like a car battery. That's what they want to do. They want it to look like a good old trusty car battery, and you just sort of use it. Yeah, yes and no. The BMS has to intelligently control the cells in that battery. It is literally putting power differently across the 4 cells to keep them in balance. It is a safety shutdown. It will disconnect internally if the voltage is too high, too low, out of charge spec, you're drawing too much. Hopefully if it gets cold, but not all of them have it. And BMSs don't have a great reputation for robustness. A lot of them, people have problems. If you look at all the bulletin board systems, people, my gosh, problems with the BMSs. They're trying to communicate, they're trying to reprogram it. Nothing seems to be standardized. It is one of the Achilles heel of the lithium battery. But you have to have it. Don't run lithium cells without a BMS. Don't. Could you get away with it? Yeah, for a little while. Sometimes, maybe. Until you don't, and then fuego. Don't. It's a necessary thing. You have to have it. But it's something to know about lithiums. They're prissy. Like they have to have exactly the way they like it. And that's really the gist of it. Is trying to figure out your usage, the basics, understanding the little idiosyncrasies of each thing. And they're not overly complicated, but you do have to remember, just like people, they have their things that they like or they don't like, and treat them within those guidelines, and they'll work a long time for you in the right application. Used incorrectly, I mean, if you try to use an economy car to haul gravel instead of a dump truck, you know, it's not going to last long, and you would understand that. It'd be like, yeah, I just keep pouring gravel into the hatchback, and eventually the whole car just sort of like fell into the earth and exploded. Of course, it's not right for the application. And that's really all we're trying to work on, is getting something right for the application. Now, I'm happy to go through more specific questions, or if there's a piece of equipment you're looking at, gosh, I'll share knowledge in the comments. Comment away. I'll do my best. Well, thanks for watching. I'll see you for the next one.